everybody. Welcome to the Resistance Broadcast. I'm John. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, our discussion show, we are going to be talking about Han, Luke, and Leia. Did the sequel trilogy change how we view those characters? Now that we've said farewell to them, looking back, has it changed our perception of them going in? Like, you know, there's been a few decades there before they came back where it's like, that's them. And now they came back. Did it change anything? We're going to talk all about that later. And Will the Force is back, baby! On the show. And on the show, with me as always, giggling, laughing, smiling, getting annoyed, as always, with my antics, James and Lacey. Guys.
Was that directed at James and me or just me?
Just James. You were giggling. James looked annoyed. It's back, baby. Welcome back, guys. We... breaking the fourth wall here. We recorded this before we did a trivia showdown on Tuesday against the Lights Camera Barstool guys, so we don't know how we did.
Hopefully I'm giggling because
but hopefully we kicked their asses. Hopefully,
John.
But what? I hope we did, but who knows? But how you guys doing? Are you guys you guys feeling well? You guys feeling well today?
Just
good.
Completely incapable of saying but.
Oh,
well, yeah.
All right. Yeah. I don't know how I'm feeling because we either lost or destroyed them. I don't know. Yeah, you're exactly right.
Yeah.
But I am excited because we're just getting off of Monday's episode, and then that at Barstool. We're back here again on Thursday for another episode. I like this. I like this show. This podcast is all right.
It's all right.
I guess you could say we kind of like talking about Star Wars. Weird.
Yeah.
And tomorrow, the final, for now, Mando fan show.
Mm-hmm.
Aw,
Oh yeah.
I thought you were going to say you were putting it back on the shelf, which makes me sad.
We're putting it back on the shelf, but then we'll dust that baby off in 4 months.
I don't like putting it on the shelf.
Yeah. But no, I Mando fan show, we didn't even think we were bringing it back, and I think it's been fun. I think people have enjoyed it, and there's been takeaways from our takes on those sort of things. And it was, with this whole pandemic and stuff like that, anytime we get a chance to come down and into the Resistance base and make some content and do this stuff makes me feel better. So I'm glad that we decided to do that. So be sure to check out the Mando fan show tomorrow for its sort of farewell for now episode. And then, like we said, we'll be back in October when Mando season 2 gets going. But
no one's ever really gone, guys. Don't worry.
Right. Yeah. So we...
Jake's face. Sorry, go ahead.
Is that
Just
line
going on and on about this show that we've been doing and it's gone, but it's coming back.
Is that the line no one's ever really gone? Is that the line that's the most annoying line coming out of the sequel trilogy?
No,
Are you
like
just
that.
asking is like a whole?
No, I'm asking you guys.
I like that line.
Like, I have one that I can't stand anymore, and it's "Let the past die." I hate when people use that. They use it too much. Do you guys have any lines?
Kill it if you have to, John.
Yeah, there you go.
I think the one that it might not be the worst, but it's the one that I think people consider to be the worst was the Rose line about the punching. I just want to punch this whole
city.
Put
my fist through this beautiful town.
Yeah.
That's a rough
line.
I
I think people point to that as like the worst line.
But it's not
I think you're talking about overuse.
Yeah, right.
I think the overused line is her saving what we
love.
Saving what we love, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or we are the flame that will burn down the fire, which will start the light, which will ignite the fire to the first lamp, which will then fall over.
It's like Mission Impossible. Mission Impossible then hits the cord, which then lights the...
Yeah, exactly. It's a Rube Goldberg quote.
I think James
which then blows up, but then sets a fire to the next thing.
Which will eventually lead to the First Order, but we're the spark.
Right. James,
but all those steps are needed.
It sounded like you were doing a little Eminem 8 Mile there for a bit.
No.
Palms are sweaty. Mom spaghetti. Where the light, fire, the sparks, the first order down. All right. Guys, Will the Force is back. We have some cool topics to get into. James, what's going on?
I fear nothing, for all is as the Force wills it.
Well, before we get started in Will of the Force, I do want to say that if you guys want to help support us on patreon.com, you can head over to patreon.com/The Resistance Broadcast. Yeah. Hey.
Allow myself to introduce myself.
I'm Richie Cunningham. This is my wife, Oprah.
This is my first time doing this. So, but hey, if you are tiers, we have tiers, you know how they go, they set up. We have tiers 2 through 5. You can submit questions and topics for this specific segment, which is Will the Force. We have some good ones, you know, like I said, it goes all the way from 2 all the way up to our generals. And that's why I just want to take a second here to thank the generals, because they're the people who really keep the base running. And that our generals are Carmelo, Andrew Staley, Jeremy Myers, Neil Shaw, David Probus, John Reese, Micah Harrison, Tampa Movie Guy, Michael Gaines, Jetta Rosewater, Beer Fett Bethany, Russ Harbison, Kendall Gellner, and Val Trichkoff. So thank you, generals, very much for supporting us and keeping the base running. I hope that you guys sent in some good questions, but let's find out, actually. The first Will of the Force question is from an officer who is a commander, Commander Matt Howe. And Matt is wondering, will Disney continue with the trilogy format for future films? I just thought about the whole introduce myself to myself thing again. John, kick us off.
Yes, they will. But I think just for the continuation of like Rey's story and that stuff. I think any other stories they tell, they may scrap the idea of we need a 1, 2, and 3 thing. But I think for the sake of like if they continue Rey and the ties to the Skywalker story stuff, they'll keep those in those nice little trilogy packages. So yes, but not for everything.
That makes sense. Lacey, what do you think?
I think that this is tough because you see the saga and you're like, obviously they did 3. The plan was to always do, you know, the 3 prequels and then the 3 sequel. And then Rian Johnson's been promised a trilogy, right? That was in the announcement that it was a trilogy originally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah. The weird thing for me, though, is that I feel like with the success of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they do sequels and even a 3rd movie, but they don't do it unless the first one is a success. And I think that you could see more franchises, including Star Wars, moving into that model of, unless it's the saga, like a Rey story, I think they're going to be like, okay, we'll make a sequel if it does well.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say yes, but only for the saga films. So basically what John said. I'm sorry. I went on a long tangent and I basically just repeated
but you got to think it through. I think that yes, they will. The only thing that really throws me for a loop is the fact that they announced 3 movies and then they backed out and they only have 1 movie right now on the slate. So then that makes me think they were like, oh, we're going to be doing trilogies like crazy. And then they're like, you know what? Maybe trilogies aren't the way to go. Let's just start with 1 film and play it by ear after that. So right. I don't know, but I do still think that there's something interesting about the trilogy format.
It's a 3-part act.
Yeah, I think they still like that, and I think they feel like that is, in a way, like it's a very Star Wars thing. I know
sure.
a bunch of other movies do that, like Back to the Future or something, or Matrix, right? But I know they're getting ready to do another
Lord
Matrix.
of the Rings.
Was Star Wars the first trilogy, though?
I feel like that might be true.
Yes.
Like did Star Wars coin the term trilogy?
It might have, but I don't know.
Potentially. I wouldn't doubt that somebody's like, no, there were these movies from the 50s and they were real popular, and that was the point, is that they were doing 3 films. They said that from the beginning. There's probably something out there, but I don't know. I do think they're going to probably stick with it, though.
James,
I think that's...
Don't you think this answer is different from Disney's perspective, like in 2017 when everything was an absolute hit, and they're like, man, we're gonna do 2 movies a year, and they're like, trilogies, yeah, and now they're like,
yeah,
I just think,
because I joined the podcast after The Last Jedi. I wonder what my perspective would have been before The Last Jedi.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know why they went down this route, but they put out The Last Jedi, and then they put out Solo, and then they're like, what lesson did we learn with this? People don't like Star Wars movies. Like, no, that's the wrong lesson. They're like, let's see, what do we learn from this? Let's stop making the movies. Let's stop announcing the movies. It's like, I don't know how your logic came to that. It's like, it's fair that you made The Last Jedi and it was confrontational. That's fine. But putting another movie right after that last one, it does not mean that you're making too many movies. It just means you made the wrong movie in the wrong order in a weird way. Like, I don't know. But yeah. But I think when they finally figure it out and they get back to making movies, I still think they're going to have a trilogy that is like their big trilogy. So,
right.
The next question is, if Ezra Bridger is brought to live action, will he be played by Taylor Gray, who is obviously the actor who voiced him? So, Lacey, this one's going right back at you. Ezra Bridger, is he going to be played by Taylor Gray?
No. I don't think that he will. I think they'll, based on the casting calls they've made for Ahsoka, I think they could easily just find someone else. So, no.
Okay. John, what do you think?
I'm gonna say yes. There's something There's something about him where he's done live action acting on a bigger scale than like Ashley Eckstein, and he could look like Ezra, and he's not known, and I like that in Star Wars. I think there's something about him that could work with this thing, and it's kind of, he's the main character of his story, but he's also kind of like the underdog and coming of age sort of thing. So he doesn't need to be perfect. And it's something about Taylor Gray that when I put this question together, I was like, that I think this works. I think he could work. So I'm gonna say he will.
I understand that, John. I do disagree, but I have a hard time coming to that conclusion because of the same points you made, which is, I feel like he looks like the character. I feel like he is of the similar age as the character.
Right.
He does have acting, like actual on-screen acting in his background as well. But I think the more interesting thing to me is that I don't know if this is where your question came from, but the rumor is that they are casting for Ezra Bridger, which to me says if they're casting, then they've already overlooked him.
Yeah.
If that's possible, because they already have
true. Again, you know.
Yeah. If the rumor's true, they've already looked at him and then they said, nah, let's go ahead and try to cast somebody else. I don't think his acting credits are enough if you want to go long term, like maybe what he does in, I don't know, Mandalorian season 2, let's say he's there 3 or whatever, is just a short little cameo. I think if somebody really clinged to him or something like that, then they're kind of stuck with this person. So just doing the same thing that they did with Ashley, yeah, they could throw her the bone, but we want to set up the potential that a character could be a long-term character. Let's get someone who can play one of our more promising animated characters, bringing them to live action. So I agree with Lacey.
And you guys make good points. I guess my thing with that is like, I don't want to see like Tom Holland playing Ezra Bridger and like having like star here, star here, star here, star here. Like,
sure.
Like you ever watched the movie JFK, like Oliver Stone? It's like every popular actor in the world in 1993 is in that movie. And then you look around that courtroom, you're like, I'm not watching the assassination trial of JFK. I'm watching 20 actors I know be in this thing.
Yeah.
And
I mean, obviously, when you're watching like Marvel too, you're like, whoa, Chris Pratt and Tom Holland.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
So, I mean, I get that too. Like, is it weird that everybody in the Marvel Cinematic Universe also looks like a very famous actor who
Right.
apparently, you know what I mean? Like, have you ever thought about that? This is weird and off topic, but I think about pretty often how funny it is that in any movie where a famous actor is playing a role, in that universe, that actor doesn't exist.
Except
so
Deadpool.
in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Robert Downey Jr. does not exist because everybody would be like, why does Iron Man look exactly, why does Tony Stark look exactly like, you know what I mean?
Except Deadpool.
Just Deadpool.
What do you mean just Deadpool?
Deadpool, Ryan Reynolds exists in
Yeah.
Deadpool.
Oh.
So
Yeah,
does
yeah.
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in there
But
weird.
that's Deadpool's thing though, breaking
Yeah.
the fourth wall. Like that's
Actually, you know what though? Yeah, you can't say that Ryan Reynolds or Deadpool or Hugh Jackman exist. He could be referencing a parallel universe for the audience.
he literally shoots himself on screen.
James, also, if we're going by rumors, like the
I did
the
forget
rumor
about
is that pro wrestler Sasha Banks is playing Sabine, and she's never acted before. So, by the barometer, if we're going by rumors and saying like, well, if the rumor's true that they're casting this guy, I think Taylor Gray's a little more experienced than.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we got another question coming from another one of our resistance officers. And this one is actually from one of the generals that I mentioned earlier. And that's Russ Harbison. And Russ wanted to know, will we actually ever see the Rian Johnson trilogy?
I didn't.
I read
should
the
write the
show
show
notes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Busted.
I read
All
these
right,
ones.
John.
I just skipped over the questions.
Or actually, I'm going to go to you, Lacey. What do you think on this one?
Will we ever see it? Okay. No. I want to, but no.
Ooh.
I think they would have. It's just like we've had this conversation a lot, I feel, over the past year specifically. Because it's like anytime he gets a microphone in front of him, they're like, so Star Wars? And he's like, oh, well, we're thinking about it. We're considering it. We're still talking. And then it turned into, oh, well, there was this time we talked about it 3 months ago. And then it was like, well, I have ideas. And it's like every time he kind of talks about it. And then with the recent statement about that book he was working on, the behind the scenes photo book, which I am like obsessed with and I really want. He was just like, yeah, well, we were considering it, but it's kind of been put on hold. I'm like, why was it put on hold? Like those are photos of a movie that's already out. Like that's already happened. So what does that mean for projects that are coming if they don't want to publicize a book or work on a book of photographs of a movie that did very well that people like? So I'm gonna say no.
Like,
with the understanding to everybody listening to this that I want it. I just don't
why do you
think it's
hate
gonna happen.
Rian Johnson, Lacey?
I feel it. I can't. I like Rian Johnson.
Have you tried telling him that he failed Star Wars fans on any one of his Twitter posts that are unrelated to Star Wars movies?
No.
John, what do you think about the Rian Johnson trilogy? You think it's coming?
This is the age-old question. This is like the non-canon age-old question about like Yoda and his species. This is the
It's
real
literally
life question.
the Star Wars, like, when is the trailer coming out? When are we getting a title? Like,
Yeah.
that's the new question.
I mean,
Well, Russ wants to know.
this October it'll be 3 years since that announcement. I do not think we're getting a Rian Johnson trilogy. I think even though he has a massive online support from a lot of diehard fans of The Last Jedi, I do think overall the general Star Wars audience did not love The Last Jedi. I did. I still do. But I think that whole adage I bring up about the juice isn't worth the squeeze, and maybe it isn't for him either. Does bringing Rian Johnson back to Star Wars, is it worth all the baggage that has come with it. Like I do that whole pre-TLJ, post-TLJ Star Wars fandom, and it's a real thing. Pre-TLJ, things were all rosy and hunky-dory, and everyone loved each other, and they're like, wow, this is great, Star Wars is back. And then TLJ happens, and everyone's split when the Earth shattered and took this path or this path. So I don't think we will. Maybe
I think that was Force Awakens, actually.
Yeah, and they jumped on one side or the other. Yeah. But maybe he'll get a story from a certain point of view, and they'll let him write one of those. I don't know.
Oh my!
I love Rian Johnson. I just don't think it at this point. I just don't think it's going to happen. I love TLJ. I gave it a 98 out of 100 in my review. So
the book is just a red flag to me. Like, why would they pause that?
Rian Johnson, who knows how to write a story better than anybody, is saying we're still thinking about ideas. No, you're not.
Yeah,
you have ideas.
The Oscar nominated.
Yeah, you have ideas.
Writer.
They clearly don't want to go forward with them because they're having a hard time coming up with ideas. You are good at making ideas. Something is not fitting here. So just logically speaking, it just seems like it's not going to happen.
Right.
He's getting his trilogy. It's happening.
I hope so.
Yeah. I hope so too. But
look, the thing is if they wanted to close the door and they didn't think that it was a good idea to bring him back, or they want to work with him, but they just feel like as a business decision they can't, they would have announced it so long ago. And that's the reason it hasn't been announced, that they've quietly cut ties, or they try to put the story out there and then bury it with some other story, is because it's still happening. And the thing is that I think you guys are right. I think that the reason Rian Johnson is saying, well, I'm still working on it, is because he hasn't put his full-fledged effort towards it, because it's not happening anytime soon. This is like somebody saying like, hey man, I'm going to give you $1 million. I guarantee it's going to happen. It's like, well, what are you going to buy with that $1 million? Well, it's like, well, I don't know. I've kind of kicked some things around, but until I actually know that I'm getting it, like until I actually start getting the money, that's when I'm going to really start thinking about what I'm going to do with the money. I think that he's kicked things around because he knows he's getting it. The thing about the book too, though, Lacey, is like, that is not so much a red flag to me, that he's not getting it, but I just think Rian Johnson is not canceled. Like I just really don't think that Lucasfilm is going, we don't know how to announce that he's not working on Star Wars anymore, so we're just gonna pretend for years that he's still involved, but actually literally nothing revolving around The Last Jedi is ever going to exist anymore. We're never going to publish books about it. We're never going to... Anything that is even remotely close to Rian Johnson is dead and gone.
I'm not saying that necessarily. I'm saying a specific behind-the-scenes book of Ryan's photos. I'm not saying that anything with The Last Jedi won't be published, or... I'm saying this is a specific Rian Johnson project.
I hear that, but I feel like what I tap into when you're saying that is the underlying issue of why they are not releasing it is because they are cutting ties with, or they're afraid to put out things that are Rian Johnson related. And I don't think that's what's happening. I think that the people over at Lucasfilm are very aware that they just can't ignore Rian Johnson forever. Like if he really was... If they don't want to move forward with him, then all they have to do is say, it's just not happening anymore.
Was he at the Rise of Skywalker premiere?
No.
It's not it's worse for Lucasfilm. These are smart people. They know that it's worse for them to just keep ignoring it than to just cut it.
You say that, but
the reason they're not cutting it is because it's still happening.
Yeah, you say that though, but they didn't announce Colin Trevorrow for like 4 or 5 months that he was fired.
Yeah, well, I mean, I understand that.
I think that there's a lot of stuff.
That's finding the best time to do it.
I think
that's having a strategic exit. But it's like when you wear your clothes. If you don't wear that shirt at any point during the year, then you throw it out because you don't wear it. They've gone longer than a year. They've gone longer than 2 years.
So I think that honestly, that there is a conscious decision not to make a decision because they're afraid about the outcome of either way. They're afraid if they say, yes, they're doing it, what's going to happen? And they're afraid that if they say, no, it's not happening, what's going to happen? And they were waiting to see the reaction to The Rise of Skywalker to continue on with these projects. And I think The Rise of Skywalker once again got a reaction they were not hoping for, and that they're changing that output.
I disagree with that. I think
that's crazy talk.
I think more.
Okay, I don't think it's crazy talk, so I don't think you should say it's crazy.
In the sense
I think
of
there's logic built in there somewhere.
I think the overall perception of The Rise of Skywalker from general Star Wars fans is better than how we see it inside the diehard bubble. But
you could say the same thing for The Last Jedi.
No, that's the opposite.
I think that might be the opposite.
Yeah.
Is the general fan was probably like, man, I didn't really like that one. They ruined
There's one
Skywalker.
factor here that we're not talking about.
The core fans.
And that is the person who wanted to give Episode 9 to Rian Johnson, Kathleen Kennedy. If she's gone after 2021, so might the idea of Rian Johnson movie trilogy. She's the biggest proponent of Rian Johnson. Michelle
Which
Redwan,
I think is crazy. It's just so crazy.
Huh?
I think it's just so crazy if that is true. I know you're just throwing it out there as like a, hey, this might be the case.
Yeah.
Like, to me, that's crazy. Like, the things he brought to Star Wars and the ideas that he had, like you said, and the creativity that we've seen with other projects he's done, like Knives Out.
Yeah.
It's just a disservice to not move forward with it.
I agree completely. I want to see his Star Wars movies. I'm just saying from the logical perspective of who was involved, who wanted him around, who wanted to give him Episode 9, it was Kathleen Kennedy, where you have Michelle Redwan, who's second in command right now, was J.J. Abrams' producer. She was probably more pushing for J.J.'s side of things. Is she still going to be around? So all those moving parts are really, I think, going to dictate what the future of Rian Johnson's project is, more so than what has happened in the past. Because if Kathleen Kennedy's gone, I think the chance of Rian Johnson stuff happening decreases, because I don't think Disney is the biggest fan of the reaction to The Last Jedi. I think that led to...
I agree with that.
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to, is Kathleen Kennedy going to be here? I don't think she is after 2021. And then who knows what happens after that. A lot of these projects we may be hearing about may get completely just shelved.
I still find it very surprising that there would be this like feud of like, well, I know I'm not approved to give Rian Johnson a trilogy, but we're not going to publicly fire him until I leave. So then you can publicly fire him. Like, I just think that's such a weird situation. But I agree, you're right. Like in any situation where, wormhole opens up in the sky and sharks come out and they're shooting everybody, it's like, well, things change. Like all of a sudden now we're worried about the fighting sharks and not so much of Rian Johnson's getting his trilogy, so that got canceled because something crazy happened, right? If a big regime change happens at Disney or Lucasfilm specifically, then yeah, things might change my opinion, but as of right now, that's not really in the future, and right now they have not canceled his trilogy, and I feel like that's still, no matter what, they have to know the best thing to do. Like, I'm in a bad relationship with this girlfriend, break up with her. Like, that's, if it's not working out, it's not working out. They're smart people. They got it. Anyway, but that could be a whole discussion, couldn't it? We should probably do the last will of the Force question, then move on to the real discussion, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good points all around. Except for that one that I made fun of Lacey for. I'm sorry, Lacey.
It's fine.
That's crazy talk.
Yeah.
If Taika Waititi's Star Wars film is the one that Kevin Feige is producing, will it star an actor or actress from the Marvel Cinematic Universe? John, back to you real quick.
No.
What do you think? No.
Just
surprising.
Enough, really. You're going to get the writer, Marvel, director, Marvel, producer, Marvel, and actor. That's saying, like,
yes,
we need Marvel to save Star Wars. Ain't going to happen. Brie Larson, I know you love and you want to be a Jedi. I know everyone wants you to be a Jedi. See ya, sister.
Lacey, what do you think?
Yeah, this question just screamed Brie Larson to me. Like, that's what it was saying. Like, would he put Brie Larson in a role?
I only brought her up because she's the one who
Really?
said I'd like to be in Star Wars.
When I read this question, that's what I thought of. Because, they had her at the Galaxy's Edge opening. She's taking all these photos. She's always posting photos of her as a Jedi. And
imagine like Paul Rudd as a Jedi.
that wouldn't surprise me. Paul Rudd, like, he somehow fits in every role. But yet, at the same time, he's Paul Rudd. Like, you see him and you're like, it's Paul Rudd, but, like, it works. No, I don't think so. They're going to get someone that's unknown, I think. I think that's the formula that's worked so far with Star Wars, is finding these younger or older, no, age doesn't matter, unknown actors that can tell the stories. And I don't think they need a well-known name because it is Star Wars. That's my answer.
I disagree. Yeah,
Okay.
I absolutely think that they're gonna pull from that Marvel Cinematic Universe
Who?
because it's massively successful. They've been doing it behind the scenes, and there's no real reason why not to. Even Marvel Cinematic Universe it used to be a joke to be in superhero movies, and now you have like big name actors all wanting to be in the Marvel universe.
I wonder if
And
their contracts are with Disney or with Marvel specifically, because if they have a contract that's like 3 movies with Disney,
I think it's
No,
Marvel
I bet-
Studios.
I bet it's Marvel Studios. That's what I would think. But I still think that they're wanting to pull from what they've already done that's successful. Like, I mean that there's no need to explain it any further. I think that they have something that works.
James, go on record right now. Pick one person. Who is it going to be? Let's go. Everyone remember this moment.
he's trying not to say Brie Larson right now.
James hates going on
No,
record.
Brie Larson would be like the absolute last person I would think too. I actually think Brie Larson's starting to lose her steam. I think they put her in Captain Marvel, and while some fans absolutely were like supporting her and stuff, I think the general audience was like,
How about Mace
whatever,
Windu
Brie
never
Larson.
died and they bring Samuel L. Jackson?
No, I don't know. I don't know who the person would be, but I think you're even looking at, it's not going to be Chris Pratt, but I'm saying like when you're looking at like even a Chris Pratt, like what is like his next big project going to be? All those people are looking to score something like Star Wars,
Indiana Jones.
and they're in with the right people, and they already have franchises that are successful.
So you're
Why
going
not
on
bring him
record
over?
saying Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be in the Taika Waititi Star Wars movie.
I'd like to be, for it to be to Zendaya.
Zendaya,
From
Tom Holland.
Not Tom Holland.
Right.
I think she would be great.
Zoe,
She's awesome.
right? Is that her name?
No, Zendaya.
What am I thinking of? Zoe
MJ?
Saldana? I'm all messed up.
Chadwick Boseman. Anything like that? All right. All right. That's it. For Will of the Force, you want to head over to the discussion?
Our discussion this week: did the sequel trilogy change how we view Han, Luke, and Leia?
Obi-Wan once thought as you do.
For 32 years, the characters of Han, Luke, and Leia have been cemented in pop culture from the moment we first met them in A New Hope to their celebratory photo at the end of Return of the Jedi. All 3 characters returned in 2015's The Force Awakens, over 3 decades later. So let's discuss each character and whether their roles in the sequel trilogy changed our perception of them. We'll kind of go through each one, so we're not dancing around too much. So let's start with Han Solo. My first thought about Han Solo is kind of that analogy where you don't want to see your heroes get old and like past their prime. I think he's the guy who everyone kind of looked up to, even though he was a little bit of a jerk. He had the swagger. He always kind of got things done. It's like seeing your favorite athlete in their prime and then seeing them try to hang on at the end of their career. That's what kind of Han Solo was. Did it change my perception of him? Maybe a little, because I'm surprised he fell back into his old ways and didn't stay on the path he was. At the end of Return of the Jedi, you kind of feel like, all right, him and Leia got this thing going on. He's going to retire from that old life. He's put that past him. He's now a hero. He's going to go celebrate and live that kind of life. And he found himself back to where he was before he met Luke and Leia, which is kind of sad in a way. So I think that maybe changed my perception of him a little bit. So what are you guys' first thoughts? Did it change your perceptions at all with Han Solo?
James, you want to go?
I think that when you proposed this question, I was really trying to figure, what really changed about each one of these characters in the sequel trilogy, and then, obviously trying to then reflect on how that affected my view of them as a character as a whole. And I think that I might not have thought some of this stuff had you not posed this question to begin with, which is interesting. It means that the sequel trilogy had less of an effect on me than this question did. So like one of the things I was thinking about was like, well, why do I think Han came back to help? And it made me really think about, well, I don't think he did it because he believed in the rebellion. I think he did it because he became friends with Luke and he became friends with Leia. And I think he wanted to do it for his friends. And I think that actually, all that he's doing, even when it comes to Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, I think he was in it for his friends. But when we see him in the sequel trilogy, he encounters Rey and Finn, and they ask him to get back into this, and he's not friends with them. I think he does it because over the years, he's changed his perception on the Force and the reality of how everything is connected, and I think he makes those decisions now more based on because he knows it's the right thing to do. So I think his growth of a character and his understanding of the universe has expanded beyond where he was not selfish anymore, but he was still kind of in it for him and his friends and stuff. And now I think he's more in it because the Force in the universe is telling him what's right and wrong. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have as good of answers for Luke and Leia, though.
I think you both made very good points. Han is tough for me because when I watch The Force Awakens and I see the older Han, like John was talking about, I kind of see my dad a little bit, like a little rough around the edges. You know his story, but you don't know the kind of in-between story of how he got to this point. And the saying of old habits die hard, like he's back to doing what he was doing in the beginning. And you're kind of like, okay, well, where's Leia? Where's Luke? What happened? What's going on? And I think it does play into that character growth, like you said, James, where he makes choices for what's the best thing to do for everyone and not just himself. But, it's tough. Han Solo is tough for me. I think hearing Lawrence Kasdan talk about it has helped, where he said, the way I wrote Han and Luke and Leia, but specifically Han in The Force Awakens, was that no matter how old you are or what you've gone through, there's certain mistakes you still make. Like just because you're older doesn't mean you're necessarily wiser, you necessarily have all the answers. They've just experienced more than Rey and Finn. And I think hearing that from Lawrence Kasdan, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Han's not perfect. He's never been perfect. And that's why he's kind of so charming and lovable, is that he does make mistakes. He is a little selfish at times, but in the long run, like you said, James, he makes that right choice. I think seeing him in The Force Awakens, he makes the choice to go see Kylo Ren, and knowing that it's not probably going to go well. it's just, I don't know. It's hard, I think, and we're going to get into as we go through these characters. You're going to hear it from me, at least. The sequel trilogy for me is harder for me on the older characters than it is for the newer ones. Like, I think the sequel trilogy is obviously for the new characters and their stories and being the heroes, but the way that the old characters from the original trilogy get not necessarily treated, I don't think that's the right word, but the way that they're written and the development they have kind of goes against what I grew up with a little bit. And I have a tough time with some of the decisions they make, including Han Solo kind of ditching Leia and going back to what he knew because he feels responsible somewhat for what happened to Kylo Ren. And it's tough to see because for me at least, I grew up loving all these characters. I'm sure you guys did too, but it's like seeing your family fail, like seeing people you care about like fall into that old behavior that you were like, I thought we were past this. I thought we've moved on from this stuff. And then you open up the movie and there he is doing what you were like, come on, we progressed.
Right.
So it's tough to watch, but it makes for good storytelling.
Yeah. So I agree with that. And it makes me think about how you adapt to the people you surround yourself with. So when he was rolling with Leia and Luke, it made him a better person because he was around people who were selfless, and he probably not even consciously developed a lot of their traits, and he wanted to be there for him, like James said. So it's like a mixture of those things. But then on the other side, it's also the reacting to your personal hardships and circumstances around things that happen to you by people you care about. So like we see Kira betray Han in that way, and that's what creates the scoundrel, the I only care about myself, that Han Solo that's not the optimist, that Han Solo that's like, you know what, if I only do what I do for me, I can't get hurt. That's the Han Solo we see in the cantina. So then you think about Kylo Ren turning to the dark side, his son turning to the dark side, and we meet this old grizzled Han Solo who's like, no one left to swindle. He's back to his old ways because that's everything that's there with Leia reminds him of what happened with Ben. So let me go back to what I did with Chewie. It was simpler. Let's do this. And they ask him about it. You're Han Solo, the rebellion general. He's like, I used to be. Like, he just says it. He's just done with it. He's like, I don't want to... If I go back and visit that, it's harder for me, even though they probably would need me. This is easier for me. Me and Chewie doing this thing, I get coping. It. It's simple. Yeah. I know how to do that without getting my emotions involved.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's what changed my perception of Han Solo because, again, like... I guess the three of us are saying he kind of went full circle and lost all the progress he had made, and that kind of bummed me out about him.
Definitely.
So maybe that part is what changed about my perception of Han Solo from what I knew coming out of Return of the Jedi.
Right. Agreed.
Do we want to move on to Luke, or James, did you have a reaction to that on Han?
Just that I really don't take, I never took to the like, oh, their relationship failed aspect to it. And the other thing is I think a lot of people put that on Han, like he's like, oh, he left, but I think Leia did the same thing. I think they both had a reaction, and she says that, but he just says it first, which makes it implies that it happened first chronologically as well. Like, I went back to the only thing I knew I was good at.
Yeah.
She said, so did I.
Yeah.
But we don't know that chronologically he was trying to hang around and she was just getting too back into politics.
That's fair.
You know, she was burying him as well. But I, like I said, I don't factor in on their relationship like the relationship failed. I think that they are two adults who love each other, and they had a tragic situation happen with their son, and they're separated, but they obviously still care about each other. They're still very closely involved. So I don't know. I never really put too much of the like failed relationship on it. I just saw it as like, this is where life led them. and it's still the same old Han Solo that I know.
Okay, so all
So
right. So
I don't really take to the backtrack thing, but I'm fair to move on to Luke because I feel like with most people, Luke is the big change.
Yeah, sure. Especially for people who don't like The Last Jedi. Let's be honest. But
you could like The Last Jedi, but not be okay with the way Luke progressed.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, so James, you want to start then with Luke?
Well, I mean, I think Luke's an interesting one because I think most people would say he had the drastic change, or he had the biggest change between the where we left off and where he came in here. And I don't know, like I said, this question made me start thinking, and it's, I get that aspect of like, oh, he was optimistic and he had a lot of faith that his father could be turned back. He wasn't the kind of person that like just looked at every situation pessimistically like he seems to do in the other one. But as someone who likes The Last Jedi, I tend to try to find why that's the same old Luke. And it's interesting because anything that you put in the sequel trilogy is going to change our perspective of the character that it was. But I think, like, had you said, hey, let me tell you another story about Luke Skywalker. He has some failings in his life, but then he, ultimately sorts it all out and comes back in a glorious way. Like, I'm like, yeah, that sounds like the same Luke to me, I guess the only thing that is really interesting is now that I know that Luke plays with the dark side a little bit, and tests it just to kind of see, what's over there before coming back to the light. It does play a little bit into the times that he did that in the original trilogy. Like, for instance, the Emperor saying, this weapon, you want it, take it, try to kill me. You can do it right now, And he's like, okay, turns around, grabs it, goes for the Emperor, and Darth Vader's like, nope. So had Darth Vader not been there, Luke would have been dark side.
Yeah.
That was the moment, and he went for it, but Vader stopped him.
Okay. So
I don't know. It's just interesting because it's in a weird way. It's like a different perceiving of the same character in my mind.
So you're saying your perception of Luke really hasn't changed much after the sequel trilogy?
I think that this conversation is inevitable. There are things that are going to be different about the original one. I think what changes the most for me is I find it interesting to see where Luke ended up and to be like, how is that character that on the surface seems so different, how is that character the same character in the original trilogy? And it makes me highlight aspects of his character that were there, and they were always there, but I never really paid attention to.
Oh, cool. Right on. All right, Lacey, where are you at with Luke now, having watched the whole sequel trilogy? Did it change your views of your first hero that you learned about at Stu Leonard's when you picked up that trilogy?
I actually want you to go first.
Well, James just went first.
Well, I mean before me.
So I'm with
How dare you break wind before me?
No, we're all about these Austin Powers references that if we don't say they're Austin Powers references, people are going to think we're so bizarre. But I think most people will get those. I'm kind of with James here. To me, Luke Skywalker, I did not change my perception of Luke Skywalker. Especially when you take into consideration the rise of Skywalker. So you have to add that in too, because that's the end of his story. Because I always saw Luke as a bit of a pessimist. It was always, even in his most virtuous, I'm a Jedi now, he always seemed to have like doubts about things. And it was always, oh, I can't do that. Oh, we'll never get out of here. Or we'll never do that. He was always very...
That's impossible.
Yeah. He was always very pessimistic about things. And that's the same Luke we see in The Last Jedi. It's just, he's an older man now. And he's like, well, what am I going to do? Just face down the First Order with a laser sword? Like, I can't do that. That's the same exact Luke Skywalker. And like you said, James, about the temptation, and he's looking at his hand with the lightsaber, and he almost did it, but he didn't do it, and he held back. And him not doing it is the same restraint of not killing Darth Vader. his dad.
That's a good point, John. I want to see a fan made like super cut of every time. It's called Optimistic Luke, and it's just a super cut of him being through like, we can't do that. There's no way.
We'll never
That's
sell it for that much.
Like all the cuts is like every time he said something that's like,
we're wasting our time.
Obviously not true because we know how the story goes.
Like,
but
most of your experience with Luke Skywalker out of like 6 movies is him being a bit pessimistic about situations, even though he's our good guy. But
those droids are never gonna make it that far,
right? So for me, like looking back at Luke, even when people paint him with that brush and TLJ saying like, oh, he would never be like that, that's not my hero Luke, it's like, when Rey leaves, he still has his white robes on. He puts those back on and he's still Luke Skywalker, but he didn't want her to know that. And that's a big difference. And like right before she shows up, he's putting his white robe away nicely. Like he still believes in everything that is going on. He just doesn't want to get back involved because he feels like he's going to cause more problems. He's being more of a martyr than screw you guys. And I think a lot of people like don't look at it that way. And then Yoda shows up and raps him on the nose and says, remember, you stupid, this is the deal. This is what you got to do. So I went into this thinking I was going to fall into that trap, saying like my perception of Luke really changed a lot. But I think out of the 3 characters, has changed the least after the sequel trilogy. And I actually like the consistency of Luke had that person grown up, which he did.
Lacey
your
is
turn.
About to drop a bomb on us.
I completely disagree with both of you. I'm going to do what I always do and say, it's not my story. It wasn't my character to write. I respect the decisions that were made. However, if we're talking about personal reactions and personal perceptions to the character, I had a very, very upsetting reaction to Luke Skywalker the first time I saw The Last Jedi. I came out of it and I sat in silence for like 45 minutes. Like I was so upset with how Luke Skywalker was handled because growing up, yes, you can say that he says those phrases, but to me, those pessimistic, like, we can't do this, is the immaturity of Luke that he grows into being a Jedi Master in the Return of the Jedi. So you see him in the beginning kind of being like, I can't do this. This is impossible. I don't, not having that confidence, and then having, the dark cloaked Jedi Master that arrives to Jabba's palace, who's ready to like kick butt and save all his friends. All you see in the original trilogy, from the moment you meet Luke to the last scene of Return of the Jedi, is him making choices to save his friends. So you can't tell me that he would go off to an island and ditch everything he knows and all the people he cares about because he feels bad about the way he treated Ben. So when you meet him in The Last Jedi, the story makes sense. He did something terrible to Ben. He feels responsible. He runs away, looking to the horizon type thing. But at the same time, the Luke that we know from the original trilogy that leaves the series on such a high, positive note, he turned Darth Vader to the light side. He redeemed his father, who has done so much damage and chaos in his wake. You're going to tell me that same guy is sucking a boob of a monster with green milk and is fishing because he doesn't want to help the people he cares about, because he doesn't want to get involved. Like, if there's anything that Luke Skywalker is, it's the guy that rushes to his friend's defense. And when I saw him in The Last Jedi, I went, like, I'm not going to lie, I went, who is this? Who is this guy? And we've talked about it before. James, I know you and I have felt this way. The Force Awakens, when the lightsaber goes flying, I thought that was the moment. That was like, Luke Skywalker is back. And honestly, even though I love where he shows up, and I love the moment he has with Leia, and I love that he takes on the First Order, even though he said he wouldn't, with a laser sword, I don't feel like it's the moment that I personally wanted with Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy. Like, I feel like if Luke had that stand down moment in the last movie, I would have a different perspective. Because, sorry.
Real quick. So, I'm getting your reaction to how they handled it, but did it change how you view Luke Skywalker now?
Yes, it makes me super sad thinking about him. Yes, absolutely. I like don't even I don't even like want to think about Luke Skywalker in the sequel trilogy because I don't think I don't think he is the person that I grew up loving and that was my childhood hero. Like he's this like negative grumpy guy. And I say this all the time, but especially with Star Wars, like for me this is an escape. It's a fun escape adventure that is giving you tons of themes and having lovable characters. But at the end of the day, the good guys win and it leaves you feeling great. The Last Jedi didn't do that for me, and it's because of the way things ended with Luke. So yeah, I have a completely different perspective of Luke because of The Last Jedi. And I think this is one of those things that I'm sure with other fans too, over time it might change a little bit more. But I feel like when you love something so much for so long and you love it a specific way, like he's walking into Jabba's palace as the hero, he turns his dad, he saves the galaxy. And then the next time you meet him, he's tossing lightsabers and not willing to help. That to me is like this like moment of like, wait, what? What is going on? And I find that a lot of people have said things like, oh, well, you know, that's his character development. It makes sense for all the things that he did. And, you know, it makes sense for his character to be alone and to be grumpy and all these other things. But the moments that we love Luke the most for are the moments when he goes to do the right thing and stands up for his friends and is optimistic that things will work out. Like one of the best moments is when he stands down Palpatine and decides, I'm not going to fight. So yeah, you could say, well, that's what he's doing on the island, but is he really? Because to me, it seems like he's hiding. And I get that when they were promoting The Last Jedi, they were like, oh, well, you know, sometimes you meet your heroes and they're not who you want them to be. Sometimes you just want the hero to be the hero, and there doesn't have to be a deeper story there.
Yeah.
You know?
I definitely think there's always two arguments to this stuff too. Like I remember back in the day when people were upset over something that was going on in The Walking Dead, and they were like, that character would never have done that. And I'm like, the character did do that, so you're wrong. Right.
And then, which is why I preface this with, I didn't write it, so it's not my decision. I'm just saying from my own personal reaction.
I know at that time, it was around the same time, you know, Last Jedi, I don't remember if it was before or after, but around that time, I started exploring what the issues people had was, and it was the fact that they didn't like what the writer chose to do with that character because they felt like it was that the writer was wrong, you know? And I'm like, stop looking at the writer, stop and start looking at the story that is, you know what I mean? And you know, I think that applies to Star Wars too. And I understand both arguments. Is like, what was the Rise of Skywalker good? No. Because it could have been better.
I think it was great.
Could have made it better. You know, I'm just saying, you know, like in any situation, like they should have done this or they could have done that and they didn't do it. So therefore it wasn't good. It's like, well, you know, that's what happened. You know, in the story, it doesn't matter if it was exciting or not. Someone's telling you a story and that's the way that it went down. Yeah, it probably would have been cooler if there was 10 Harrier jets there too, but there weren't. So that's not the story.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that. And I think the biggest thing that I have been grappling with is the idea that Luke would run away and not come to help. That's what's bothering me.
You know, another thing to add to this too, for me personally, is that like, I know that sometimes in life when we're first starting out, we think we have a pretty good grasp on the situation because at the age of development that we're at, we are only being told so much of the story. Like you hear stories about like in history, like, oh, this guy was a king, or oh, this guy like discovered this land or something like that. And then like years later, you find out more about that story. And it's like, well, he discovered that land, but he also like killed a bunch of people to take that land from them or whatever, you know? And when it comes to the Force has a lot of spiritual ties, and I think like religion is like that too. I mean, you start off, and what we teach our kids is that Jesus loves you, right? And then like you get further into the Bible and development and trying to understand what God's love really means. It's harder, and it's very easy to at one point be like, I'm totally in and I get this and nothing can stop me and I'm super positive about all of this. And then where, people end up sometimes is just like, I have so much wisdom now that it's hard to cope with the whole gravity of how everything is connected. You know what I mean? A lot of his arguments.
I'm not really sure where you're going with this. I'm trying to follow.
Because Luke Skywalker, he's telling Rey, this is why the Jedi have to end, is I'm grappling with the fact that when I step in, I set off the balance that belongs to the universe. It does not belong to us. It does not belong to me. And you only get that from years and years of studying texts. And I've skimmed them.
I guess I don't know.
But I think that's what's interesting about someone who, really dove in and tried to be the best Jedi that he could. The more he learned about the Jedi ways, the more it was like, maybe I shouldn't be messing with this stuff. I was really stoked when I became a Jedi.
Yeah, but if you step back from that, Luke as a person, not even Luke as a Jedi, Luke as a person was willing to always to jump in to help his friends. So if you take away the Jedi stuff, him running away and not helping, and Han and Leia kind of being left to pick up the pieces, which then Han kind of goes off to do his own thing. So if you look at Luke as a person,
I 100% agree. I'm just saying that I also think it's fun to explore the idea that he thinks the way he's helping his friends and the universe and everybody is by shutting it down. It's a bad system. Stop.
That's it's one of those things about the sequel trilogy's impact that is going to age well, and it's one of those. There's so many different ways to look at it, and people like, it could have been the easy thing where the green lightsaber comes and Luke beats everybody and it's great and we were all on the same page. Well, that was awesome. Luke came back, saved the day. And that would have been great.
I'm not even saying it has to be that though. I feel like you guys are jumping to the complete opposite of saying, oh, well, because you didn't
I
like
didn't finish my point, but yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What I'm saying is I think the complexities of this trilogy allow us to all have varying ways of looking at it, like we're saying, from a certain point of view, that are all correct. Because we see them and there's truths in every aspect of it. And it's kind of like how you see art. It's in the eye of the beholder, right?
With what you're saying, Lacey, yeah.
Yeah. So we're saying you're right. And I agree with points you're saying. I agree with points James is saying. And then there's other layers you can look at it. Like you can say, Leia told Luke in the Return of the Jedi, if he can feel your presence, run away. Go away. Like that's what I need you to do right now. So there's other ways that this can be looked at. But ultimately, did Luke Skywalker change in your views? To me, no. To Lacey, yes. But in the end, it's interesting to talk about. That's for sure. But we have to talk about Leia too. Right?
Yep.
So, Lacey, you didn't start one of these off. So why don't you start with Leia? She obviously was hindered a bit because of her passing, and they did everything they could to give her an arc in the third one. I personally thought it was her best in the sequel trilogy. But did Carrie Fisher and Leia in the sequel trilogy change your overall perception of the character of Leia?
So Leia is interesting because, like you said, it's hard to not think of what could have been given she was still alive.
Yeah. Even more so, like how the creators wrote the story as opposed to what was really the story. Yeah.
Yeah. But that being said, I think that her presence in the sequel trilogy is true to who Leia is that we meet in the original trilogy. I think Carrie Fisher played an active role in her dialogue and in her character development because she lives and breathes Princess Leia. So I think it was just great. I loved it. I loved everything about Princess Leia, General Organa in the sequel trilogy. I love how they handled her and her situation in The Rise of Skywalker. I think for me, the one thing that changed leading into the sequel trilogy is the idea that Luke trained her. That for me was like really, really cool, because growing up, that's the one thing I always wanted to see was Leia being a Jedi too. And I never got that. So the idea that she did have a moment where she was able to be a Jedi, and like we see her use Force powers in The Last Jedi, that was really cool. But yet still be that consistent, sharp, witty, intelligent, strong character throughout all three movies in the sequel trilogy. Like, my perception hasn't really changed. She's still awesome. She's still one of the best characters.
That's a good point. Mine is very more surfacey with Leia, just because of the point you said about the fact that she becomes a master of the Force, and she has a Padawan in Rey.
Right.
She takes over from Luke. I never would have imagined that coming out of the Leia I knew from the original trilogy. It was just Luke was the Jedi, Leia was the leader, Han was Han, and I never would have associated her with using the Force, even though her and Luke had the connections, and Yoda said there's another, and it's Leia, and Vader saying I could turn her to the dark side. It's all there, but I never would have, in my head, guessed that she would have trained, established the powers enough to where she could teach someone. She had her own lightsaber, like none of that stuff. So all that changes my whole view on Leia right there on the surface. The other thing that is probably more beneath the surface for me, and on a darker sense with Leia, that changes my perception of her is like her. I just view Leia in the sequel trilogy as sad. That just there's just this, and I don't know, maybe I carry some of that because of Carrie Fisher's death when I view her, but thinking about her talking to Luke in Return of the Jedi, saying, I remember my mom, just images really, and I just remember her being very beautiful but very sad. And that's how I view Leia in the sequel trilogy. In the original trilogy, she's sassy, smart aleck, knows what she's doing. Someone's got to save our skins, take charge, be the leader. And in this one, she's more subdued. Obviously, she's older now, but there's this weird overtones of sadness, and obviously because she lost her son to the dark side, and I get that, but just something about it changes my view on her because I guess of the circumstances and consequences of what happened with Ben Solo. So those two things, her using the Force and her just having that unconditional level of sadness that I never would have pictured seeing the original trilogy Leia having. James, where are you at with that? With Leia?
I actually have a really hard time with Leia, and if there's going to be a character here where I say that I don't perceive the original trilogy character any differently, it would probably be with her. I have a hard time, like I know where that character ends up, but it's still, to me, even more so than the other two, doesn't seem to affect really how I view where the character was at that point in their life. Because it's almost like if in the sequel trilogy they made Leia flip burgers, then I would watch the original trilogy and be like, man, she seems like she's going to be a general one day. But instead they just made her flip burgers. Well, she actually ended up becoming a general one day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just see that character, and then I think about what I know about her, using the Force as far as like talking to Luke. I think the closest we could come to this is it's totally fair to be like, I don't think I would have thought she would have became a Jedi Master. I think that the fact that she like was related to somebody like, hey, my brother is a Major League Baseball player, which means in a way like I know a lot about baseball. I am myself not a baseball player, but I know a lot, probably more than most people, about it because I'm so close to it. So I did kind of always feel that, but I would say the whole master thing is interesting because that didn't even really kick in until she saved herself in The Last Jedi. I think even if you look at like where did the character of Leia end up? Well, she ended up as this like wise Jedi master. I don't even think you could have convinced me of that after I walked out of Force Awakens.
Right, I agree.
I'd be like, you mean the Carrie, the Leia that we know from the original trilogy in Force Awakens ends up there? You know?
Yeah.
It's almost like the change. Even you're watching The Last Jedi and you're like, yep, the same Leia. And then she flies back to the ship and you go, oh, ho, ho. She's been working on the Force. That's crazy. But it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense that given the fact that the war is over and her brother is the last of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
So it all fits in with me, and I have a really hard time piecing together that isn't the life of this character down the line.
Interesting.
So anyway.
Lacey, any final thoughts on Leia?
Nah, I'm pretty good with what I said.
Yeah, I think that whole the Leia Poppins thing, like it was so controversial for people because it jarred them, like you said, because the Force Awakens, it wasn't there.
Everyone I spoke to that was not a big Star Wars fan didn't like that part. They were like, this makes no sense to me.
Right. So I think for people who are casual Star Wars fans, and I don't like saying that word, but people who check in with the movies and then I'll see you in 3 years when you're back, have a bigger perception change than maybe we do because we're so vested in these characters and the intricacies of their relationships and their decisions more than it's just, that movie then this movie then this movie then. So I think it's always going to be different for us than people on the fringe or people who cause the box office to be $1 billion anyway. But that was interesting because I think we all had different answers, but I think they were all right in their own way. So that's cool. But let us know what you guys think about the three characters. Did your perceptions change on how you viewed them? Remembering them from the original trilogy to coming out of the sequel trilogy. What changed? Let us know in the comments. Hit us up on Twitter at RBATSWNN, however you'd like. And let us know what you think about our discussion here. Obviously, we had to run through three characters in a finite amount of time, but we hope you dug that. And now, speaking of Twitter, we're going to hear from you guys in a fun little segment that Lacey's going to go through right now called Resistance Transmissions. Lacey?
All right, guys, it's time for Resistance Transmissions. So the way that this works is every week John puts up a crazy, wacky situation, and you guys give your answers. So I don't know what the scenario is. I don't know what you guys said, so I'll be reading these in real time. So the scenario is... when Han won the Falcon from Lando, Lando forgot to take his capes, so Han decided to sell them for extra cash. What does Han's ad posting for the cape say? Did I say caps?
Cops.
You did. I think that could easily look like an S.
Anyway, Lando forgot all his capes,
That sounds like a dumb
Han
statement,
decided to sell them for extra cash. What did his ad posting for the cape say? Mm-hmm. First up is Adam Odell at Odell Adam. And Adam said, smooth capes for sale. Fair and square pricing for a haggle-free buying experience. Capes arrived right before you did. Hurry in as the deal may get worse over time. Pick up at the East platform.
Very preferential. Good job.
Next up is Carl Axel Franzon at Carl Axel Franzon.
Franzon.
Way to get your handle, Carl. He said, hokey jackets and ancient robes are no match for a good cape on your shoulder. These capes are better than I can imagine, which is quite a bit. Get them now.
Nice.
I like that one.
That one's loaded.
Next is Rob Bartlett at RB7RADS. And Rob said, well, what do we have here? If you have been looking for love in Alderaan places, then these capes will look smooth on top of your hashtag Make Solo 2 Happen t-shirt.
Yes, teespring.com/stores/resistance broadcast, everybody.
Next up is Ion.
Imagine Lando in a Make Solo 2 Happen t-shirt.
Yes.
Like his whole outfit is exactly the same, but he has like a regular t-shirt on.
We should do it.
Next up is Ion Cannon at Ion Cannon. And he or she said, selling these because honestly, who would find a friend's clothes on a spaceship and just wear them? I would hate it if someone did that to me.
Lando.
Next is Scott Gibson at Scott Gibby. And Scott said, bunch of weird coats for sale, probably warm enough for Bespin, but not for Hoth. Honestly, it could be carpet samples, not sure. Next up is John Reese at John S. Reese, and John said, slightly narcissistic smuggler looking for new attire. Need something to help hide how you cheat at Sabak. Need a piece of cloth to cover your embarrassed face when you betray your best friend, parenthesis me, parenthesis. Then come buy a slightly used Lando Calrissian cape.
Nice. Well done.
If I saw that ad and I came in, I'd be like, this ad seems oddly specific,
Very
Han.
personal.
Yeah.
Next is Corey Edwards
You
at
right?
Real Corey Edwards, and he said, for sale, capes, not mine. You know, capes. All style, no substance. Not the long, cool ones either. Shorties. Cocktail napkins for your back. They probably go well with little mustaches. Shiny belts. Again, not mine. Must go. Best offer. Will trade for vests.
I love Shorty's cocktail napkins for your back. They go well with little mustaches.
I think my favorite part is best offer. Will trade for vests.
Yeah.
Next up is Mark at Dekind Awakens. At Dekind Awakens. And Mark said, it's been a rough week. My girlfriend just left me with no explanation, had to give all my money to a rebellion. Now I'm in debt with a very big gangster. Please buy this collection of capes to help get me through these hard times.
Excellent. There's Solo 2 right there. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny, just to jump back to the last one really quick. You said, I think my favorite part was the fact that I thought it was just for sale capes, not mine.
Oh
yeah.
I didn't know there was more to it, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty good. Just straightforward.
And last but not least is Sean Wars at Sean Wars. Hi, Sean. And he said, free capes left at Docking Bay 94. Current owner of the Millennium Falcon has no use for them. Previous owner might pay handsomely for them if you have time.
So that's one way to do it, I guess. Leave it up to someone
Nice.
else.
And you could haggle with him a little bit.
Yeah.
He might not like it. What is it? He might not like it.
But I accept it.
It's
There's
three
one other
things,
one.
yeah.
What am I missing?
I don't agree with it.
Yeah, he might not like it. He might not agree with it, but he'll accept it.
Yes.
Guys, thank you so
That
much.
almost worked.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for your answers. If you want to be on the show, make sure to follow us on Twitter at RBATSWNN. Every week, John puts up some crazy, wacky situation, some scenario, and you guys give your answers. And that's it. Thanks so much. Back to John.
Okay. Thank you all so much for watching and listening and being a part of TRB. Make sure you subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. Remember, Rate the Resistance is going on, so get involved. SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube if you're watching. So we have 2 episodes every week, so make sure you're subscribed to us. Going to StarWarsNewsNet.com every day for your Star Wars news, reviews, editorials, information, all that good stuff. We already plugged the shirts. You know where to go to get those, like this one here. I am all the Jedi. And that, I think, is that. You guys can find me on Twitter at Johnny Howe and writing and editing over at StarWarsNewsNet.com. James?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Myra Trunks.
Lacey?
People can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Lacey Gillerin.
All right, everyone, we hope you have a wonderful weekend. We hope you're staying safe, you're well, and getting through all this stuff. We're trying to do that all here together, so we appreciate you tuning in with us because it makes us feel a lot better. We'll, of course, be back with you tomorrow for the final Mando fan show until Season 2 of The Mandalorian this fall. And then, of course, on Monday morning, we'll be back with you right here with another episode of the Resistance broadcast. We'll see you around, kids.